Today, I'm excited to welcome Steven Lubka, Head of Private Clients and Family Offices for Swan Bitcoin. Steven is also a walking and sun maximalist, walking around 350 miles per month. Welcome to the Bitcoin Edge, Steven.
I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to this chat. And it's, we're filming on November 6th. So we just found out the results of the election, and Bitcoin is on its way it's in an all-time high. So good time to talk.
It's an exciting day. But before
Yeah.
we get to the election, tell us a little bit about yourself and what was your journey before Bitcoin?
Yeah, absolutely. So I found out about Bitcoin for the first time in early 2017, kind of before the bull run. I wish I went all in the day I found it out. I would be substantially wealthier, but that is just that is the process with Bitcoin. It's a little bit of a learning curve, but I got into it in early 2017. I had a call with a friend who I hadn't spoken to from college in a long time, and what was he doing? What was I doing? We caught up. I was, doing some investing and running a business at the time. And he said, "Oh, you gotta check out Bitcoin." And I said, "Bitcoin, isn't that a scam? Like, is that really real?" He said, "No, you've got to check it out." And so I went online that night and I started reading about it, and I just got completely fascinated off the bat. It took time to build like a complex and full understanding of it, but I was hooked. And and early 2017 was a good time to buy. You kind of discover this new thing, you get very excited about it, and then you put some money in. It basically does nothing but go up for a year. So it's really like self-reinforcing that, man, I'm smart and I did the right thing. It obviously got it got a bit harder, going through the bear market after that. But for a while there, it was incredibly euphoric. And when I got to the end of the road, I was running a business with a business partner for various reasons. We ended up going separate ways. And at that moment, I was like, I have no idea if this is even possible or how it'll work, but I'm going to try to work in this industry. Like, I want to find a way to work in Bitcoin. And that was early 2018 that I started doing that. And I worked as a consultant for high net worth investors for a while. But if you can imagine, at that time, I mean, it was early, it was a bear market. There wasn't like a ton of work. So it definitely wasn't a full-time thing generally. And I ended up starting a software development agency with another business partner. And we did some Bitcoin work, occasionally some wallet stuff and some companies, but a lot of it was, mobile web app development, kind of standard stuff. So I tried as much as I could during that time to do as much work in that industry at the time. But again, 2018, 2019, that just didn't really exist. It was very limited. But it was always kind of my goal. And then 2020 rolls around and Bitcoin starts heading up again. I remember when we crossed 10K, I was completely euphoric. I was like at the office and I was just blown away. I was like, we haven't been above 10K in 3 years. Like, we're so back, it's going to be amazing. And nobody else cared. Nobody, like, they didn't, once we got over 20, when it doubled in less than a couple months, they started paying attention. But during that time, I was very enthusiastic. And then we have COVID, right? So COVID happens and we have the lockdowns. And during the lockdowns, this app gets really popular, Clubhouse. I don't know if you remember it, but yeah, like audio. And it was huge. I mean, everyone was doing it. It became Twitter Spaces, or at least the idea got kind of adopted by Twitter. But it was novel. And so everyone's locked down. They can't leave their house for a period of time. And so we're just on Clubhouse all day. And I'm running Bitcoin rooms and answering questions, educating. And I met the Swan team there. Now, Swan was very young at that point. I think the whole company was like 15 people, something like that. But I met Corey and Brandon and Brady and some of those guys, and we were just in the same rooms and doing that for weeks and a couple months. And then one day I just woke up to a job offer, and Corey was saying, hey, basically they enjoyed just listening to me answer questions and navigate those spaces, talk with people. And Swan had started to see more like high net worth investors try to onboard. And so Corey brought me on, and I started kind of looking at what was really happening with that trend. And my pitch to him was basically like, look, let me just call these people. There wasn't a whole lot of like, Swan wasn't really calling. It wasn't a phone call thing. It was email. It was web. It was self-serve. There was obviously some degree, but it wasn't like a big thing. And I said, you know what? Let me just come in, and I'm going to call every single one of these people that reaches out. We're going to have a phone call, and I'm going to hold their hand, and we're going to walk them through. And what we found is, in this segment, I mean, these are people buying larger amounts. I mean, my thesis there is like, this is what they're used to. That's how Morgan Stanley works. That's how Goldman works. That's how private banking works. Like, that is finance. They're not like, let me set up an app and like buy some Bitcoin and put it on my wallet. That's like a very novel thing. And so a lot of these people, they were buying it for the first time, and like the personalized approach was a huge hit. That is the service that they wanted. And that became our private client team. It's now a whole team of people. And, whenever people come in, they get assigned to an account advisor, like cell phone, text, or call them anytime. We work with them in that way. But it was a huge success. It continued to be a huge success. And, the rest was history.
Well, that sounds like an exciting journey. Are you finding now that you're getting more and more people coming into Bitcoin with the all-time high?
Yeah, well, we're a few hours into this, so we're a little early on that data set. But generally speaking, over this year has been very good, right? During the ETF launch, it was positively electric. I mean, it was nonstop. It was probably the busiest period we've seen in so long. And, a little quieter during the sideways action, right? But I've been here for almost 4 years now. And once Bitcoin starts moving, you see just a huge amount of inbound interest come in. And I think this year will be no different. In fact, I think it'll be larger.
So just to clarify, at Swan, you work mostly with high net worth individuals and you help them buy Bitcoin and store it.
Yeah. So like me specifically and my team, yes, that's what we do. Obviously, anybody can use Swan for any amount. And it's understand Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin, store Bitcoin, corporate accounts, retirement accounts, trust accounts, navigate kind of allocations, really anything people need. It's it's having somebody that these clients can reach out to. And, I mean, at the end of the day, what people should understand is that for most people in the world, like we're unique, me and you and the people listening, in that like we really enjoy spending our time learning about Bitcoin. But the average person doesn't want to do that in that way. They might want to own Bitcoin, and they do, but especially people that are kind of already at the end of their career, they're retired, like, do they really want to put in a couple hundred hours to learning Bitcoin? Some of them, sure, absolutely. I know those people as well. But the average person, no. And so it's just having like a trusted partner that people can trust. And they can say, look, Steven's my Bitcoin guy. If I need anything, I know he can take care of it. And I don't have to think about this. And I actually think that was one of the huge misses of the industry, right? Because the dominant players are these exchanges. These exchanges are so geared towards like tech native 20 and 30-year-olds that want to do all this complex stuff. And it's just my answer to them would be like, that's not where the money is. That's not where, like, if you want to onboard, $10 billion of assets to Bitcoin, that's not where you're going to do it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So did
No.
you go through an altcoin phase, or you were just all Bitcoin from the beginning?
I did for sure. I did for sure. So when I got in 2017, I mean, it was the ICO bubble. I mean, I think 2017 was the most retail heavy, altcoin heavy cycle that we've had since. I think 2021 was much more muted. And I think this cycle will be even much more muted. But this was like the heyday. And, what was interesting too is you hadn't had so many failures yet. When people look at these kind of altcoins and things, there's 7 years of failed ideas, and those ideas going basically to zero that you can look back on and be like, yeah, they thought it was good that time, and they thought it was good that time, and they thought it was good that time, and every time it failed. But in 2017, you didn't have that history. There was a handful of small new altcoins. Some of them had even done well. Some of them had even like outperformed Bitcoin at that time. Ethereum from the launch, Litecoin, right? So at least over the time period since they launched, not from inception, but like, if you bought Litecoin on day one or you bought Ethereum on day one in 2016 or whatever, like it did well. So it was a much more, and I would say the idea was even plausible then because there were this whole wide open expanse of possible concepts and blockchain and all these things. And it did take some amount of experimentation for people to truly figure out that doesn't work, right? And so no, I totally went through that phase. I went through that period, and it wasn't until probably mid 2018 that I think I was like, all right, like Bitcoin's really the thing to focus on. And even then, it probably took me to like in 2018, I was probably like a Bitcoin mostimalist. Like I was like, this is the real thing, but I hadn't kind of totally written off everything else. And by 2019, I was like, man, like it really is Bitcoin.
And that's mostly because with every other coin we have a leader in a way, and it's
A
not
100%. I mean,
completely.
yeah, Bitcoin is really the only project where there is not an organization, a founder, a leader, a foundation, whatever, right? That's a huge factor. But it's also that a lot of these technical ideas just don't hold water, right? Like it could have been possible that supply chain applications could have benefited from using blockchain. That was like a big thing, right? Like supply chains are so fragmented, data doesn't get shared across them very well. What if we just had one unified ledger that was trustworthy, that international trade? I mean, that's a perfectly plausible idea at face value, right? But what ended up happening is people realized that, like, A, getting all these different people to adopt this shared ledger was incredibly difficult. And B, the benefits of doing so just didn't really matter that much. Like consumers didn't really care that they could see where their tomato was at every step of the way. They just wanted a tomato at a good price. So like it was the centralized nature, but it was also that these sort of what else is a blockchain good for technically ended up being not much.
Yeah,
It's for money.
that's a good point. So you mentioned that it's a day after the US presidential election. We have a winner, President Trump, with no issues contesting, which was great.
Yes,
Tell me, how do you
clear win.
think, how is this going to affect Bitcoin going forward?
Yeah, so this is really a big deal, to be honest. And I'm gonna, for the audience, like when I talk about these topics publicly, like obviously I have my own views on things, but I try to just talk about it from the perspective of Bitcoin and just how I see this impacting Bitcoin in just like a neutral, cause like dependent way, right? So that's how I'm going to talk about this. I have my own political views, but this is neither an endorsement or a criticism. So I think it is a huge deal for Bitcoin, and it's on a lot of levels. Really, really, honestly, a profound number of different ways. So obviously, on the highest surface level, you have a president for the first time that is vocally pro Bitcoin, and it's not just him, right? Like, because presidents can say things. Every single major person on his campaign team owns Bitcoin. Vance owns Bitcoin and was early to talking about it and is from kind of the Thiel network, Peter Thiel, who also owns substantial amounts of Bitcoin. Vivek owns Bitcoin. RFK owns a lot of Bitcoin and has been very public about it. Musk is one of the largest corporate holders of Bitcoin. And while he has his flirtations with Dogecoin and various things, I mean, he's one of very few people in the world that owns billions of dollars of Bitcoin. So it's not just that Trump said some good things once. It is that there truly is a profound Bitcoin alignment, and there's been engagement with that. So A, we have never had anything like that. B, um, you are looking at so Bitcoin and crypto companies were the biggest source of political donations this cycle. They outspent everybody else because they wanted to see Donald Trump in office. Now we have Donald Trump in. You got the president outcome that donors wanted. However, all of those companies and individuals now have his ear, right? They now are able to push for legislation that is more favorable for those companies, that works better. And so you have kind of like a long tail here where they can now advocate for better legislation, better regulation, and all of these different things for the industry. And then further, it looks like I would love to see someone quantify this, but it appears to me that the funding from the industry was a huge factor in how much he won by. And you can see this in the Senate races where the anti-crypto, and I'm just going to say crypto here, anti-crypto candidates got removed and largely the pro-crypto candidates got put at a huge scale. Now, what message does that send? It sends a message to A, the Democrats, and B, the entire political landscape, that being anti-crypto is a losing political proposition with no upside. Like, that is like, there's this like wild group of fairly wealthy people that will just come in and destroy you if you try to destroy them. So this changes the whole landscape and the whole system of incentives here, where I think like Elizabeth Warren's no longer on the banking committee, Sherrod Brown is down. There's going to be a complete audit and probably criminal charges for Operation Choke Point 2.0. I mean, the ramifications are broad. No one is going to try to like destroy the industry with regulation again. I mean, it has, I think, just made that just there's no upside there. There's only downside, and you miss out on $500 million in funding. Like, it's a losing proposition. So the regulatory landscape has changed like profoundly over time. And so those are kind of like, and then obviously like, does he do the strategic Bitcoin reserve? I don't know. But his percentage chance of doing something like that is orders of magnitude greater than Biden, right? So regardless of whether he does it or not, or maybe he even goes beyond that and he starts buying Bitcoin, who knows? The chance of these outcomes, though, just increased exponentially. We'll see if they happen. But those are kind of the surface level conclusions. I think most people are aware of like, okay, like these are the high level things. What else is interesting? What else is interesting is that the Trump administration and coalition, so the 2024 win is extremely different than the 2016 win. These are very different things. In 2016, the Trump win and the Trump administration was basically like a big fuck the system vote by the plebs, right? It was just normal people that were fed up and they resented it. And it was this like, surprise candidate, this dark horse candidate. And they just wanted to kind of like take it apart. And that created a certain sort of environment in administration. The 2024 team is not that at all. It is a fundamental elite realignment where you have billionaires, extremely successful people who were formerly Democrats, who broadly speaking, were formerly aligned with the Democratic Party. This is Elon Musk. This is Joe Rogan. This is RFK. This is so many people, as well as tons of Silicon Valley, like Bill Ackman, David Sachs, like so much of this money, including giant tech CEOs, Zuckerberg, Bezos, and we already said Musk. This isn't a middle America vote, a middle America realignment. This is elites defecting from the Democratic Party into a new coalition. That has a huge amount of influence, especially because we already have said this is a more pro-Bitcoin coalition. So you're now looking at having the first kind of like obviously pro-Bitcoin president, especially after the spot ETFs launch. So you have Wall Street endorsing Bitcoin as a legitimate financial asset. You have these products taking in tens of billions of dollars in inflows. And now you have a formal political regime that is likes this stuff. The career risk is gone. It doesn't exist. I don't care what hedge fund you're at. I don't care what company you work for. It is now a legitimate proposition to say we should own some Bitcoin. There's nothing kooky about that. There's nothing out of left field. And, we have this vote coming up for Microsoft, right? Should they buy some Bitcoin on the balance sheet? And I have no idea if they do or not. But it just got substantially more like, we really need to take this seriously, right? And so these kind of big swings of power and capital, profound. This takes me to my final point, which is that where you end up on the other side of this election is a fundamental appetite for significant change in the political system. Like people who have swung at a historic sort of scale that say, we're willing to have radical change. Whether we get that or not, we will see over time, but there's an appetite for it. And that is a sort of like political view. That's a sort of mindset that I actually think is very pro people being friendly to Bitcoin. Because we're at a point where it's like saying the entire establishment was relatively corrupt, relatively non-functional, and we're willing to take this more radical risk. And if people feel that way, the probability that they'd also say, hey, well, the monetary system isn't going so well either, and buy some Bitcoin, I think that goes up substantially. And then this is situated in a macroeconomic environment where central banks are easing, asset prices are at all-time high, Trump's going to lower taxes, he's going to deregulate, he's going to promote economic activity, and he's going to promote kind of policies that center America, which then will have further knock-on effects. And I mean, this is a sort of setup in Bitcoin that I think you wait 10 years looking for something this good. I mean, it's clear. I got first thing this morning at 9 a.m., I got a text from CNBC talking about everything that happened. And the reporter basically asked me, like, is there anything standing in Bitcoin's way right now? And my answer is no, not really.
Time to be in Bitcoin. That was a really great synopsis of what's going on at the moment. The one thing I wonder about, we still have a lot of debt. Our system is a debt-based system, and we have had to print a lot of money. Do you think that will continue?
I do. Yeah, there's no escaping that. Now, is there definitely more appetite in this Trump administration to try to balance the deficit a little more and curtail spending? Yeah, I think there is on both the Elon Musk side and also the Trump side. And, I actually was having some conversations with an individual who's talking with the transition team for a treasury spot. And that's definitely on the mind is managing the deficit. But let's be clear of what that means. Right now, the deficit is kind of unsustainable in a certain sense. Our interest expense is prohibitively high and will get higher as long as rates stay where they are. And this ends up producing inflation, basically, is the risk. Managing the deficit for a Trump administration and a Trump treasury means keeping that interest expense in a tolerable range. It does not mean getting rid of it, right? It's like getting it so the amount of money that's being printed is more reasonable, more, able to be tolerated. But there's certain things that are just fundamentally like our entitlements systems, unless you completely scrap them or dramatically reduce them, there's no getting around that. As Lynn Alden says, there's really no stopping this train unless radical overhaul that I don't think anybody has appetite for. Now, may they bring it? So there's two sides. One, Trump was historically, I think, a little more on the money printing side. If we look at 2016, he wasn't a particularly fiscally conservative candidate. They're signaling that this time may be a little different, but he may end up being kind of more money printing there. But he also may end up kind of reining it in. Either way, it's not going away though. And while obviously there's this argument well, if they do more money printing, it's good for Bitcoin. But honestly, the tectonic changes we just talked about are so much more bullish for Bitcoin than a 10% difference in the budget and spending, right? It's just acceptance, institutionalization, support. These are the big stories here, not does he print 10% more or less money than the next guy?
So if Bitcoin isn't just about money printing, it's also about the free market, and Trump supports that, which is wonderful, but it's still outside the US system, and it's relatively small, right? It's
Yes.
one between 1 and 2 trillion. So besides the money printing, what other reasons cause Bitcoin to increase in value?
Yeah, so on a simple level, I would just start from the fact that like a vanishingly small number of people in the world, a fraction of 1%, own more than $10,000 of Bitcoin. And so there's just a simple fact that it is under owned. If 1% of global assets went into Bitcoin just because of what it is right now, I mean you're exponentially higher, right? So it's just so early in that kind of how owned it is versus other things. I mean, the having an asset that people can own to protect against the debasement and dilution of fiat currency is a big deal. And people will say, well, hey, what about these other things? What about stocks and real estate? But when you really look into it, there's a lot of issues and problems with those other assets that Bitcoin doesn't have, right? There's, risk with company performance, dilution from share issuance, the incredible cost of home maintenance on real estate between taxes, home insurance, and repairs, as well as just needing to manage that. It's operationally intensive. And, bonds don't hold their value. There's just a huge amount of capital that needs to go somewhere. And Bitcoin has pristine properties for that. So, I mean, I really think it's just a simple story of this is a bearer asset, it's a global bearer asset, and it protects investors in these scenarios. And whether the rate of money printing goes up or down or whatever have you, I mean, it's still going to be there and you're still going to need it.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, how much of your total net worth is in Bitcoin?
I don't answer that question exactly, but I actually so like definitely materially less than 100%, which might be like for some people like a crazy way to answer that question, and for other people they might be like, "What do you mean?" I'm actually like of the opinion that like saying that someone needs to have 100% of their net worth in Bitcoin, which some Bitcoiners say, is actually kind of a bearish statement, because if this thing goes 100x and you had 50% of your net worth in it, great. You are now 50 times wealthier. Like, does it really matter if you're worth 50 million or 100 million? Like, is that really a difference, right? Or you had 70% in, or like what? Like, it just like the goal I don't think is maximizing every unit of return. For me, the reason I don't do it is I have financial obligations to some people I help take care of, and I can't have volatility with the funds that other people rely on. I mean, like that amount, I can't do like an 80% drawdown on some of that. So I buy equities and I buy some other stuff, and that's part of it. And then, the other part is just like, I don't want to sell Bitcoin. I want something else that I can sell. And then the last part, though, is I really enjoy markets. I really enjoy investing. And it's a fun challenge for me. And I frankly want to know, I want to discover that I can be right about more than one thing. Like, it's actually like not as enjoyable for me to just like, okay, I was right about Bitcoin. I enjoy the process of managing money and markets, and I want to show myself that like I can be right about many things. And frankly, I have in my in a significant portion of my non-Bitcoin part of my portfolio, I've actually like kept up with or outperformed Bitcoin. I bought Nvidia stock when it was relatively low, and that's been a tremendous performer. When I saw kind of the AI stuff that was happening, I've also owned MicroStrategy, which is a Bitcoin play, but it's has been also a great performer. But I've been able to construct a part of my portfolio where I've basically kept up with the returns of Bitcoin, but with lower volatility. So that's a win for me. Mostly I do it. I don't say you need to do that. I do it because I enjoy the challenge.
I like that answer. And that's a little bit why I'm asking. Some people switch out of real estate because you've got all the management of the real estate, and
Yeah,
Bitcoin's just much easier to hold, right? If you're not into that. But if you're a good investor and you enjoy it, that's a whole another
it's fine.
story. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I want to get onto your walking. I just love that you're a walking and sun maximalist. I did read your long article and
Oh, amazing. Thank you.
I went walking today without my sunglasses on.
Good.
But
Definitely.
tell us a little bit about, did your health journey come before Bitcoin or after?
It did. Yeah. No, it did. It definitely came before Bitcoin. So I was, oh God, I've probably been really into that on some level since I was like 19 or 20. I probably started walking like when I was like 19, not nearly as much as I do now, but I just realized that like if I walked a few laps around my neighborhood every day, I just felt so much better. I just really felt better during those times. And I didn't really know why. And I didn't really like, it was less kind of studied, but, started doing that and then fitness and some other things. So it's been a process for me for a while. Ultimately, like the reason I've been so passionate and also vocal about it online is that it just made such an enormous difference in my life. It made just such a tremendous and enormous difference in how I felt, how I performed, how I was able to navigate my life and everything else. And I mean, it really benefited me so much that I just like, I'm not selling anything. I'm not selling sunshine. I'm not selling walking. These things are free. And actually, their level of accessibility is one of the reasons I'm so vocal on it, because like just go outside. This doesn't cost you anything. You don't need to train to do this. You don't need to have an athletic background. It's like good for people of all ages. And, and it's just like I view it as just one of these baseline universal factors where every single person alive like will have a better experience if they move more and are outside more. And the research backs this up, right? So walking is one of the single most impactful things on all cause mortality. So basically a group of people's chance of dying for any reason over the period of the study. People that walk more are just less likely to die, period. And you actually see similar things with sun exposure. Like despite some of the stuff with skin cancer and all that, people that get more sun are healthier and live longer, period. It's not even close.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. The one thing that I stopped doing, I was a professional tennis player and I did get a little bit too much sun
Yeah.
despite using some sunscreen in some places. But I also then became deficient in vitamin D. And I couldn't figure out, I'm like, I live in Florida. How can I be deficient in vitamin D? But a little bit of it was because I started avoiding the sun.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
yeah, and I absolutely agree. You do feel so much better. Walking is great for you. Not everybody can run because it's hard
Yeah.
on the joints unless you're completely perfectly aligned. So,
But
yeah.
here's the thing as well. What people need is not exercise. It's to not be sedentary for huge lengths of time. And the thing with running is even if you go running for an hour every day, which is a lot, what are you going to do for the rest of the day? You're going to sit. That's the problem. Like why I'm so big on walking is it's something you can actually do in small bursts for like hours a day, that you can listen to a podcast, you can do all sorts of, you don't just have to walk like, and it breaks up the sedentary time. And it's that sedentary time that's a real risk and that is really negative on quality of life. And it's like there's no exercise you can do for long enough, regularly enough, that it'll interrupt that. You can't deadlift for 4 hours a day. You can't run for 4 hours a day. You can't play basketball for 4 hours a day. Like, but you can walk.
And I've heard you talk about people are lacking purpose at this time. I know that would help with it, but what's the reason behind that, do you think?
So that's a great question. We live in a very deconstructed and relativistic time. What I mean by that is that you look at now compared to human history, and you find that in the modern world, we progressively do not know what we believe is true. And not just true, we I think the belief that the overall stance that society takes right now, at least the dominant ideology, is that we cannot know what is good and what is bad. Like, they're maybe happy to make some of those claims on like, it's good that people don't suffer, right? Like, which is kind of a materialist claim. It's like the only thing we can know is that, you shouldn't be starving and pain is bad. That's a very materialist claim. The claim that society can't make is, what is the good, which implicitly means the better than something else, way to live a life. And this is where society spazzes out and says, well, we really just can't know. That's subjective. Happiness is subjective, and everyone likes different things. And maybe like you find this horrible, but someone else might love this. And maybe this person, like, they're just happy, like, they just really want to kick dogs, and that just brings them a lot of joy. And the other person wants to have a family, and like, a family or kicking dogs, like, which of these things is better? Well, we really can't say. I'm obviously exaggerating to a little bit of an extreme, but fundamentally, this is what society believes. Society believes that happiness is purely subjective, meaning anything could make anyone equally happy. And therefore, you can't judge. And I don't say that in a negative sense. You can't judge something as being better than something else. And I think this is a fundamental collapse of meaning making in society, because at the end of the day, human beings are a type of form. We are, I don't say this in a materialist sense, but like, we are an entity, a type of thing. We are a type of being. And there is no, like, for the type of being that a human is, eating rocks will always be inferior to having a wife or husband that loves you. Like, there's no subjective value hierarchy, right? Because like, human beings as a whole thrive when people love them. Therefore, we can conclude that whatever helps humans have loving relationships with people close to them is good, and things which impair that are bad. And just because there's some weird psychopath 3 states away that like takes kind of sick pleasure in being radically alone does not, like, that edge case does not change this. It doesn't make it different, right? Like, just because you can find an exception doesn't mean it's not true. And that's how these people argue it. They say, well, this guy really likes eating rocks. It doesn't matter. You're still wrong. Human beings thrive in a limited set of circumstances. They thrive when they are loved, they are safe, but they are also courageous. They also take risks. They're also strong. They're also engaged. And they thrive more when they are more intelligent and more capable and take more responsibility in their life and do more things that have meaning to them. And like, this is just true. People are happier. People are better. And a happier person is a better person. If I gave you a choice, would you like to be a happier person or a less happy person? Like, no one's going to choose to be less happy, to be less fulfilled, which tells you something. It tells you that it's better. It is better. And this may sound like annoyingly pedantic or rudimentary to some people listening, but the reason I'm making what may sound so obvious is that society does not believe this. It does not. And what has taken its place is this kind of moral approach that says the only thing we can do is not interfere with humans actualizing their desires, right? That whatever people want to do is good. If you want to, like, be part of your community and have a loving family and like cultivate personal virtue, that's great. But maybe this other guy wants to, like, I'm trying to think of like a really inappropriate example. Like, they want to be a furry. They want to dress up in a dog costume and go to conferences and have sex. Like, those things are not the same. Those things are not the same. And it is patently absurd that as a society, we can't have a clear value hierarchy there. And I think this is beyond the lack of meaning, because meaning implies that something is meaningful. And we have crippled people's ability to know what is meaningful. Like the average person is not good at finding their own meaning. Like, I'm sorry, they're not. This is a very high level self actualization viewpoint, which I appreciate. And I think that does get to like the pinnacle of human unfoldment, where, yeah, at a certain point, it is good for you to find the thing that is most meaningful for you specifically. And I think that is the ultimate fulfillment in some ways. But the average person does not know how to do that. They are not equipped to do it. They don't have the skills to do it. And so they need to be told by their culture, by their traditions, that what is good and right for you is to get married, to have some kids, to have a job you like, to participate in your community, to be healthy, be like, do those things. And the thing is once, if you do those things, even if you don't know what's good for you, because those things are good for the human, you become better and more capable. And then maybe at the end of that, you find that special thing that's just for you. But society wants to skip that whole step. And they just want a bunch of unequipped, incapable people chasing some like misbegotten ideal of self-actualization that actually isn't self-actualization. It's self-gratification with your lowest desires.
I'm going to have to think about that.
That's fair enough.
So, what are some of your biggest lessons from Bitcoin?
Yeah. I think the power of community, in a sense. I think one of the just most incredible parts about my time in Bitcoin is all the Bitcoiners I've met, and these just incredible community of intelligent and free thinking and engaged people. It's amazing how a thing, an object, a system can bring such an incredibly human non-object community around itself. I mean, it's incredible. I love Bitcoiners, and I love this group of people. And I mean, honestly, the thing I'm most grateful for in Bitcoin is not the money or anything else. It's actually all the people that I've met. Changed my life.
That's really cool. So, my next question was, how has Bitcoin changed you? Well, it's changed your life because of the people. Any other ways?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely pushed me. Like, I think most of us that get into this, we always were a little bit of like a independent thinker, a little willing to go outside the box a little bit. And I was certainly always that way. But Bitcoin, not that I'm even saying all Bitcoiners are very good at this, because it's actually a flaw as well as a virtue. But for me, it did actually teach me how to be rigorous about thinking through countercultural ideas. Like, there's this whole, like, Bitcoiners are natural contrarians. They want to take like the opposite side from like the normative societal lens. But that's not always right. So there's a trap that you can fall into, because like the opposite of the norm is not always the truth. And so participating in Bitcoin, I realized this community can be very correct, and it can also be very incorrect. And so it really prompted me to get very good and very diligent at how to think through things in a way that I can try to be materially more correct than I am incorrect. And I'm not saying so much that I learned that exactly from the Bitcoin community, but participating in it made me realize how important that is. And there are many people in the community that are very good at that, but there are also, I think, common like ways that people are not good at that. And Bitcoiners can also fall for the like needlessly contrarian position of just like the knee-jerk contrarian, and it's just not always right.
Now I've figured out why I'm a Bitcoiner. A little bit of a contrarian. I've heard also risk taker, but
Yes.
yeah, and early adopters are a little bit like that. But it's also the other thing about Bitcoin is once you go down the rabbit hole, there's just so many great things. Learning, you continue to learn because you learn that central banks aren't really the best thing for society, and then you learn the history of money, and you learn about health, and it's a great rabbit hole. So I've found Bitcoiners are willing
Yes.
to learn and grow.
It's if everything I thought about money was wrong, I wonder what else I was wrong about. And then people do the health thing and people do, X, Y, and Z. And it's
Yeah,
good. I mean, that's a good thing. I think people fundamentally should think for themselves. I think it's harder to do than people expect. I think it is a skill. It is truly a practice. It is very easy because like you're effectively saying like I'm gonna not rely on the accumulated wisdom of people that came before, or at least I'm gonna rely on it in a different way where I'm evaluating it. And that, I mean, you're losing a huge advantage there in some ways, right? And when you do this, you do find that there still is a tradition for basically any contrarian ideal. There actually is like a lineage of people that have been working on that for some time, but it's navigating that. Like it's not always most expedient to go out on your own, and yet we do need to think for ourselves.
I love that. I think it's so important to think for ourselves rather than
Yeah,
be programmed.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me
Yeah,
today, Stephen. This was a lot of
absolutely.
fun.
It was a
And
pleasure.
where can people find you?
Yeah, just type in my name on Twitter, Steven Lubka, and my account will be the first one to pop up. Really great place to connect with me. I'm very active, answer DMs. DMs are open. So if you need anything, reach out there. And, also swan.com for Swan. And I'm always happy to get on a call for anybody who listens to this that, wants to go down the private client route.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. My pleasure.